components of the Defense Department.
Mm-hmm.
So she doesn't have jurisdiction over them. Secretary of
Oh,
Defense
she has no jurisdiction.
zero. The only thing she controls is the budget. Sanctions are going to come back to bite us.
Yeah.
You know, I think that American sanctions are what led to the creation of BRICS. Can you
explain that?
Yeah. The BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and then they've added a couple. They've added Iran and South Korea and a couple of others. When I was in China last year, I was there for a week for a conference, and I was struck by how few places took MasterCard and Visa.
That doesn't surprise me.
Well, they took this card called Panda Card, and everybody had these Panda cards. So I asked one of the shopkeepers, what is this Panda Card? And his explanation was so right on. He said, with Visa and MasterCard, because they're American companies, all transactions are routed through New York, right? And so even if the transaction only hits New York for a tenth of a second, it's still considered to be a U.S. transaction. So if the U.S. government imposes sanctions, we can't make that transaction. But what we did is we created Panda Card, where all the transactions go through Shanghai, which is their banking center. And so if the Americans put sanctions on us, he said, we don't care. We don't need Visa and MasterCard. We have Panda Card.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Well, now not only are the BRICS countries merging their economies, they're talking about a unified currency, like the euro. Well, if they have a unified currency, American sanctions are going to be worthless.
And do you think that is a real threat to overtake the dollar?
I do.
Yeah.
Last year, for the very first time, China bought a shipment of oil from Kuwait and paid for it in yuan instead of dollars. Never happened before. And we went back to the Kuwaitis and we raised all kinds of hell. And they're like, look, what are we going to do? They're a major global power. This is how they wanted to pay for it.
Yeah.
And it's because we sanctioned everybody. I remember still being at the agency and the Treasury Department had announced new sanctions on Iran. And I remember saying to a colleague, how many more sanctions could there possibly be?
Yeah.
Like, haven't we sanctioned them in every facet of their economy?
Self-fulfilling prophecy, man.
That's exactly it.
I'm not saying the intentions are always evil or something like that. It's just it's the eye for an eye. People get carried away with it, and it's like you're going to make the problem worse. Yeah. And we should see that now. We're going to talk about the Russia-Ukraine thing a little later. I don't want to jump to that because I do want to keep my promise and come back to the Gabbard thing because there's an important point here that I keep thinking about in my head because I like her too. And I don't fucking know her. I hope she's cool. But, she's qualified, as you said. Mm-hmm. She understands how this world works. All that's true. And let's say it's also true that she's a great person and has great intentions. She is still, just like the president, by the way, which would say something about the problem with the system. She is still technically at the mercy as a DNI. Is it DCI or DNI?
DNI.
DNI, right.
Mm-hmm.
She is still technically at the mercy of the people who read her in on things.
Yeah.
She's not out there in the field.
You're absolutely right.
If they're in offices at these different agencies and they're like, we're not telling this bitch this stuff.
And I'll go one farther than that.
Oh, please.
There are, 18, 19 intelligence agencies in the U.S. government? I forget what the latest number
that
is.
we know of.
Almost all of them are DOD agencies, right? Army Intelligence, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, DIA, DARPA, NSA. They're all components of the Defense Department. Mm-hmm. So she doesn't have jurisdiction over them. Secretary of Defense
has no jurisdiction.
Zero. The only thing she controls is the budget. She controls two important things: the intelligence community budget and the president's daily brief, which was just in the last couple of years transferred from the CIA to the ODNI. That's it.
But again, it's what they feed her in that too.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And it would be easy to cut her out because then they could say, if called on it, well, the secretary's briefed. We report to the Secretary of Defense. So he's briefed. We don't need to brief her. Now, she has a little bit more sway at the CIA, but not really. I mean, listen, in the Obama administration, there was this huge fight because Obama announced that he was going to start making NSA officials and DIA officials station chiefs overseas.
Okay.
And John Brennan said, I will resign if you do that.
That would have been nice.
It would have been nice. Would have been good for me.
Yeah.
And Obama backed off. So it's just CIA officers that are station chiefs overseas. Most places around the world don't have anybody from NSA or DIA or anywhere else. It's just CIA. But he was trying to make it a truly intelligence community position, right? It's supposed to be, but it's not. Never has been. With Tulsi, that's going to be her bureaucratic fight, is remaining relevant at the CIA. Because if you look at the wiring diagram, she's technically above the CIA director, but in practice,
that's right.
It's more of a dotted line, and they're on the same line. Yeah.
That's what I worry about.
Yeah,
it's like
I'm with you. I worry about it too.
It might not be her fault that she ends up completely ineffective, and it's a waste, you know? And like that's another double-sided, double-coin problem right here you point out with the Brennan argument to Obama. Mm-hmm. I can't even believe I'm going to steal man John Brennan. But like I understand why he would want it to stay his people, just because I've heard all the stories from you and everyone else, and we can read our history books about the interagency high school drama that happens.
Oh, God,
but at the same time, you're giving the CIA all the power to make these decisions and say, well, we saw what we saw, don't worry about it.
That's right.
And these other agencies then get rendered less effective at their job, too.
We used to laugh at these other agencies. We used to laugh that the joke was the only reason that NSA and DIA existed was as a pipeline for people to apply to the CIA, or as somewhere to go when you couldn't get hired by the CIA. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just had a guy in here Matt Hedger, who did 4 years in NSA, and then they pulled him to be a NOC.
Oh, I have deep respect for the NOCs. That's hard work.
I do too.
That is hard work.
He's different. And he's psychologically different too. And he explained like they look for different things in that kind of job than they do to hire you or Bustamante.
Right.
But there were a lot of people who were like, oh, this is the fakest shit ever. Bro, he was brought to me by Shawnee Delaney and backed by Jim Lawler.
Oh, and well, it is.
And he was also...
I like Jim Lawler a lot.
Jim's a good guy.
Yeah, solid guy.
Probably still in the CIA. But, hey, Julian, I'm not in the CIA. I'm like, the fuck you are, Jim. But, this guy, the other thing, I don't think we said this on the first podcast with Matt because he has to come back. We got cut off. He had a flight. But he got doxxed on the dark web by a foreign intel service. That's the only reason he can talk. Because he was known publicly. They had to pull him out. Like, he's actually one guy who's like, yo, I'm not still at CIA. And I'm like, I think I believe you.
I worked for a former NOC, and he had been outed by Aldrich Ames. Yeah. Ames outed a whole bunch of people, and they had to all be brought in.
Crazy. Because these guys, I'm glad there's someone that can do that. I couldn't do it. Oh my God. The things that he said he saw.
Couldn't do it. I'm told that that's what Amaryllis Fox Kennedy did. She was a NOC.
Really?
Yeah. She was an international art consultant.
Makes sense.
Uh-huh.
A lot of money in that.
A lot of money.
A lot of hidden money in that.
A lot of money laundering in that.
Yes. That's what's fascinating about that Leonardo one, because I'm like, all these rich people, they got their own little world.
A friend of mine who works for the Treasury Department told me that systems are pretty good right now, to the point where there are only 3 ways to really launder money and really get away with it. He said, fine art, real estate, and racehorses. That's it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Mm-hmm. We had when I worked at Merrill in my initial career on Wall Street, we worked with these ultra high net worth people.
Right.
And it was funny because there was one situation where, whenever we needed access to anything, we had people for that, right? And we were like the quarterbacks, and we bring them in. And there was one situation, I'll just say it involved, because, it's privacy kind of things. It involved art. And so it was big art. And I didn't know shit about fuck with this. And so, I'm just following along. This was my boss running this one, and I'm just kind of watching. and we brought in the main art guy, and I put 2 and 2 together later. I'm pretty sure it's the dude who was the main expert in that Lost Leonardo documentary, because he was the head of Bank of America's trust department for fine art. And I couldn't remember the guy's name because I never met with him. But like, I remember those conversations with my boss where I'm just asking him questions, not even about the case we were working on, but like what people do with this. He's like, dude, even I like look at this with like it has 10 heads, because people, you just declare a value on something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so,
nobody knows.
You don't know.
It's worth what somebody's willing to pay you for it.
Yeah. And then you can, the downstream effects of that on how you slosh around money. I mean, anyone out there, you don't have to like get in the weeds with that. It's exactly what it looks like.
Right.
So this lady was a knock doing consulting for all like the richest people. And I wonder what that she could find with that.
Yeah. She was supposed to be the deputy CIA director. And 2 weeks ago, and Tom Cotton, that clown act
he's
from...
a statist.
Yeah, he's a big-time statist, neocon from Arkansas. He said, absolutely not.
Why?
He just doesn't like her.
Why does he know her like that?
He wanted to be the CIA director.
Tom Cotton did.
Yeah, and he wanted to be CIA director in Trump's first term and got passed over for Pompeo. So I think there's a little bit of bitterness there. And he's a young guy. He's only, in his early 40s, maybe?
Yeah, something like that.
And here's this upstart woman who, happens to be married to Bobby Kennedy's son, and she was the campaign manager. And why does she get to be the deputy CIA director? Something should have gone to me, right? So he sent word to the White House that he would filibuster her appointment. And so the president did something that was just so smart. He named her Deputy National Security Advisor, which is a way more important job, because the CIA director reports to the National Security Advisor.
Right.
So now her title is Deputy National Security Advisor, I think, for counter.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.